My apartment flooded during a storm. Mom said, "Find a bench." I wrote in the family group chat, "Can I sleep at home tonight?" Dad replied, "No, your brother's kids need the guest room more than your little disaster." My sister added, "Don't bring your wet problems here." But what they didn't know was that before sunrise, they'd be begging me to open the door they had just closed. The water came through the baseboard at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. I had been sitting at my kitchen table sharpening my grandfather's folding knife on a whetstone when the carpet under my feet went cold. Not damp, cold and heavy. The way fabric feels when water has been rising underneath it for longer than you realized. I stood up and the carpet squelched. By the time I pulled the baseboard trim away from the wall, the water was already 2 inches deep along the east side of my apartment and climbing. I am a water damage restoration technician. I have been ICARC certified for 8 years. I have walked into flooded basements, hurricane-stripped kitchens, and burst pipe living rooms across western Michigan and told homeowners the exact dollar amount of what they were looking at. I can read a moisture meter the way a cardiologist reads an AG, and I can tell you within 6 hours whether a structure is salvageable or whether the remediation cost will exceed the insurance cap. I know water. I know what it does to drywall in 4 hours, to subfloor in 8, to a furnace in 12. And I knew, standing in my own apartment at 9:15 on a Saturday, that my building's sump pump had failed, that the storm outside was not slowing down, and that the water in my apartment was coming from the foundation and would not stop until the storm did. I moved my field log and my certification binder to the top shelf of my closet. I put my grandfather's knife in my jacket pocket because the knife went where I went and had since the day my grandmother handed it to me at his funeral and said, "He built the business with this. Don't let it rust." I carried what I could to my truck. The rest would be wet by morning. Then I opened the family group chat and typed 7 words I should not have had to type. "Can I sleep at home tonight?" My mother answered first. Margene Bowen, the woman who had lived in a house I helped pay for since I was 28, typed 3 words and sent them to every member of my family at once. "Find a bench." My father answered second. Sid Bowen, the man whose basement I had waterproofed with my own hands 3 years ago, whose sump pump I had installed on a Sunday while he watched football upstairs. "No, your brother's kids need the guest room more than your little disaster." My sister answered third. Tara Bowen, whose car insurance I had been paying for 14 months so she could drive to the dental office receptionist job she had just started. "Don't bring your wet problems here." I sat in my truck in the parking lot of my flooded apartment and read the 3 messages in order. Mom, Dad, Tara, 3 people I had been supporting financially for years. 3 people whose bills I paid on the 1st of every month without being thanked and without being asked how my day was, had just told me to sleep on a bench because my brother's children needed the guest room and my emergency was not their concern. I took a screenshot of the group chat. Then I called Keegan Dahl. Keegan answered on the second ring because Keegan always answered on the second ring. He was my business partner. We co-owned the restoration van, the equipment, and the small warehouse on Wealthy Street, where we kept the commercial dehumidifiers and submersible pumps that could drain a flooded basement in 90 minutes. Keegan and I had started working together 6 years ago. Our first job, a flooded basement in Kalamazoo, where the homeowner was standing in 8 inches of water crying while her cat sat on the refrigerator. Keegan had checked the moisture meter, looked at the reading, looked at me, and said, "Dry starts somewhere. You just have to find the line." I had used that sentence on every job since, and I had never met anyone who meant it more than Keegan. Because Keegan was the kind of man who showed up at 9:30 on a Saturday night without asking why, and without asking what happened, and without saying anything except, "I'll be there in 10. He was there in 8. I put my bag in his truck, and we drove to his apartment on the east side. And I sat at his kitchen table with my jacket still wet and my grandfather's knife pressing against my thigh through the fabric and the taste of floodwater still in the back of my throat. Welcome to Family Secret Tales, where the person they call last is the one who was paying first. If you have ever sent a message to the people who raised you and gotten back 3 sentences that made you feel like a stranger in your own bloodline, stay close. Subscribe now, because this family is about to learn the cost of every door they closed. Keegan put a coffee in front of me and sat down across the table. He did not ask about the group chat. He had seen my face. You want to talk about it, or you want to work? I want to pull some records. Keegan slid his laptop across the table and went to the other room. That was Keegan. He gave you space the way he gave you tools. Without ceremony. My name is Thatcher Bowen. I am 32 years old. My grandfather, Walter Bowen, started a water damage restoration business in Grand Rapids in 1987 with a folding knife, a wet-dry vacuum, and the belief that people who help when the water rises are worth more than people who wait until it dries. He built the company into a 2-van operation before he died, and when nobody in the family wanted to take it over, because nobody in the family wanted to drive to flooded houses at midnight and crawl under porches and breathe in mold for a living, I did at 22, with a used van and a certification I earned at a community college. My brother Russ was getting a business degree that my parents paid for at Grand Valley State. My sister Tara was getting a cosmetology license she never used. Nobody in the family came to my ICARC certification ceremony. Nobody asked to see the business plan. My mother told her church group I was in cleanup, and my father told his postal carrier friends I mopped basements. The year I grossed $118,000 and bought the commercial dehumidifiers that could dry a 3,000 square foot house in 2 days, my father looked at the van in his driveway and said, "That's nice, but Russ is raising 3 kids. Russ was always raising 3 kids." It was the sentence that ended every conversation about my work, every request for recognition, every moment when I came close to mattering in a family that measured value by dependence and not by what you built. Russ had 3 kids and a wife named Linnea, and an apartment he lost 4 months ago when his landlord sold the building. Russ and Linnea and the 3 kids moved into my parents' house in May, and nobody told me. Nobody mentioned it at the June cookout where I brought the potato salad and the $850 mortgage check. I found out in August when Tara mentioned the kids in a text, and I asked which kids, and she said, "Russ's. They're in the guest room." Didn't Mom tell you? Mom did not tell me. Mom did not tell me, because telling me would have meant explaining why the Visa card with a $14,000 balance was suddenly dropping, and why the guest room was suddenly full, and why the $500 a month I was also sending toward Russ's credit card debt was being pulled from the same account that paid the mortgage. Everybody in that group chat knew about the arrangement except Russ. Margene had built the arrangement. She was the architect of every financial structure in the Bowen family, the person who decided where money went and what stories covered its tracks. 4 years ago, she came to me in the parking lot of a Meijer and asked me to pay for Russ's daycare. She did not ask in the house. She did not ask in front of Sid. She asked in a parking lot because parking lot conversations do not have witnesses, and Margene Bowen understood witnesses the way an accountant understands receipts. I had been the financial floor under the Bowen family for 4 years. $850 a month to supplement my parents' mortgage because Sid's postal pension did not cover it, and the house was in a floodplain where the payments ran high. $3,600 a year for the flood insurance policy I had set up after I waterproofed the basement, because the house sat 40 feet from the Grand River floodplain and one bad spring would wipe it without coverage. $180 a month for Tara's car insurance, which she told her coworkers was covered by work. $500 a month toward Russ's Visa balance, which Margene told me was temporary and which had been running for 2 years, and $1,200 a month toward Russ's daycare, which Margene had told Russ was a state child care subsidy that she had applied for on his behalf. The subsidy was me. There was no state program. There was a direct transfer from my business account to the daycare's billing address, set up by Margene, who had come to me in a Meijer parking lot and said, "Your brother cannot afford childcare, and if his kids don't go to daycare, Linnea can't work, and if Linnea can't work, they lose everything." I said yes, because that is what Bowens do. We show up when the water rises. The total, roughly $37,000 a year. For 4 years. $148,000 in support that my family received, expected, and never acknowledged, paid by a man they told to find a bench. I opened the insurance portal on Keegan's laptop. I typed in the policy number I knew by heart because I was the one who had set it up, and I was the one who paid the annual premium every January. The screen loaded. Policy status, lapsed. Effective date of lapse, March 14th, 2024. Reason, premium payment not received. I pulled the payment history. The $3,600 annual premium was due January 15. I had set it up as an automatic withdrawal from my parents' household account, the same account my $850 monthly mortgage supplement went into. In January, the withdrawal processed normally. In February, someone changed the linked payment method on the insurance portal from the household account to a Visa card ending in 4471. Russ's Visa. The card that was already carrying a $14,000 balance and had no room for a $3,600 charge. The payment bounced. The insurance company sent a lapse notice to the address on file, which was my parents' house. Nobody responded. The policy lapsed March 14. My father had moved my flood insurance payment to my brother's maxed-out credit card. Whether it was intentional sabotage or careless stupidity did not change the number on the screen. The house I had waterproofed, the basement I had pumped, the sump pump I had installed with my own hands, was sitting 40 feet from a floodplain in the middle of the worst storm Grand Rapids had seen in 6 years, and it was completely uninsured. I pulled Sid's text next, 2 messages I had sent him about the sump pump battery backup. April 12, Dad. The battery backup on the sump pump needs replacing. It's been 3 years. I can bring one over this weekend. His reply will do. August 3, Dad. Did you replace the battery backup? Storm season is coming. No reply. The battery backup ran the pump when the power went out, which was exactly what happened during storms, which was exactly what was happening right now. And my father's 2-word reply in April was the last time either of us had mentioned it. I almost closed the laptop and drove to my parents' house right then. My hand was on the screen and my chest was tight, and the knife in my pocket felt heavier than it had in years. But the screenshot of the group chat stopped me. Find a bench. Your little disaster. Don't bring your wet problems here. Those 3 sentences were still on my phone screen, and they were worth more as evidence than as fuel. Keegan had taught me that. Dry starts somewhere. You just have to find the line. Welcome back to Family Secret Tales. If you are the one whose reminders get ignored and whose payments get redirected, hit subscribe. Because the water is about to reach the people who told me to find a bench. And the only man with pumps is sitting at someone else's kitchen table. The storm did not slow down. At 1:30 in the morning, the Grand River crested 2 feet above flood stage. The neighborhood where my parents lived, the neighborhood where I grew up, sat in the secondary floodplain, which meant that every house within a quarter mile of the river was taking groundwater through the foundation. The sump pump I installed was designed for exactly this, rated for 4,600 gallons per hour, powered by a 12-volt marine battery backup that kicked in automatically when the grid went down. The battery backup that Sid said he would replace. The battery that had been dead since sometime between April and August, while nobody in that house noticed, and nobody in that house called the son who would have noticed and would have replaced it in 20 minutes. At 2:14 in the morning, Keegan's phone rang. Not mine. Keegan's. The caller ID showed Sid Bowen. My father had called my business partner because I was not answering my phone. Keegan looked at me across the kitchen table. I shook my head. Keegan declined the call. At 2:31, Margene called Keegan's phone. Her name lit up the screen in the dark kitchen, and I looked at it and thought about the woman who had typed "find a bench" and sent it to the son sitting 4 hours away in a flooded apartment with nowhere to go. Keegan looked at me. I shook my head. He declined. At 2:48, A text from Tara came to my phone. I read it without responding. Thatcher. Mom says the basement is flooding. Can you call Dad? The woman who told me not to bring my wet problems was now bringing hers to my phone. I turned the screen face down. At 3:12, Russ called. This time Keegan answered, because Keegan understood that 4 calls in an hour meant the water had arrived and the family was out of options. Keegan put it on speaker. Russ's voice was tight and stripped of the casual superiority he carried at every family dinner. Is Thatcher there? The basement is flooding. The pump is not working. Dad says there is 3 feet of water and it is still rising. The furnace is down there. The electrical panel. Everything. Keegan looked at me. I sat at the table with the knife on the surface and the insurance printout next to it and the group chat screenshot glowing on my phone. I did not move. He's here, Keegan said. He's been here since 10. Tell him to bring the pumps. Dad says the water is at the furnace already. We need the commercial ones. The big ones. I'll let him know. Russ's voice changed. The authority dropped out of it and what was left was younger, smaller, closer to the brother I remembered from before the kids and the debt and the Visa card. Keegan, please, tell him I didn't know about the daycare money. Tell him I didn't write that text. Tell him I was asleep when the group chat happened and I would have come to get him. Please. Keegan looked at me. I closed my eyes for 3 seconds. Then I opened them. He heard you, Keegan said. Come to the apartment. Bring your parents. Keegan hung up. He looked at me for 4 seconds without speaking. Then he said, your call, Thatcher, all of it. They told me to find a bench. I know. The insurance lapsed in March because Dad moved the payment to Russ's Visa. Keegan leaned back. You want to go to the house? I want them to come here. At 3:40, headlights swept through Keegan's kitchen window. A car door slammed, then another, then a third, slower, heavier. I heard my father's voice in the driveway first, hoarse and stripped of authority, the voice of a man who had driven 20 minutes in a storm to find the son he had told to sleep on a bench 5 hours earlier. I opened Keegan's front door. Sid stood on the step in a rain jacket with water stains up to his knees. Margene was behind him, with mascara tracked down both cheeks and her church coat pulled over a nightgown. Russ stood at the car, arms crossed, wet hair flat against his forehead, looking at the door the way a man looks at a door when he needs what is behind it, but cannot bring himself to knock. Tara was not there. Tara had texted 20 minutes earlier, "Is this serious?" "I have work at 8. I did not reply. Thatcher, Sid's voice had dropped the authority. It was just a name now, just a sound, just a man standing in the rain, calling for the son he had dismissed 5 hours ago. The basement has 3 feet of water. The pump is dead. I need your equipment. Come inside. They filed into Keegan's kitchen. Margene sat down hard. Sid stood with his hands on the back of a chair, his knuckles white. Russ leaned against the counter and looked at the laptop screen, which still showed the insurance portal. He could not read it from where he stood, but he could see that something was open and that it mattered. Keegan stood in the hallway doorway. He did not sit. He crossed his arms and watched. "Thatcher, we don't have time for this," Sid said. "The water is at the furnace. If we don't move now, I lose the whole system. We have time. Because I am not going anywhere until we talk about money." Sid's face shifted. The desperation narrowed into something harder. The same expression he had worn in the group chat 5 hours ago. The face of a man who believed his son owed him service without question. "You come running to us every time your little business has a problem, and the one time I can't put you up because your brother's kids are sleeping, you act like the world ended. I spent 30 years carrying mail in the rain. Thatcher, 30 years. I never called my mother at midnight asking for a bed. Your grandfather slept in his van more times than you know. You own a shop full of pumps, and you text your family like a child because your apartment has a drainage problem. You are 32 years old, and you own a shop vac. Act like it." Keegan's arms unfolded. He looked at Sid the way he looked at homeowners who screamed at adjusters, with a patience that was not patience, but a decision to let a man finish digging before pointing out the hole. Marjean's hand found Sid's arm. Sid, not now. He needs to hear it. He has always needed to hear it. He pays your mortgage, Dad. Russ's voice came from the counter, flat and stunned. He told me in the kitchen. $850 a month. He pays the insurance. He pays Tara's car. He pays my daycare. $148,000, and you are standing in this man's partner's kitchen at 4 a.m, calling him a child. Sid's mouth closed. The room held the sentence. I did not offer coffee. I set 3 things on the table: the group chat screenshot, the insurance lapse printout, and the sump pump text messages from April and August. Before we talk about pumps, we are going to talk about these. Sid's jaw tightened. This is not the time. You decided the time when you told me to find a bench. Marjean's hand went to her mouth. She knew what was coming. She had always known what was coming, because Marjean was the architect of every financial arrangement in the Bowen family, and she was the one who had come to me 4 years ago and asked me to pay for Russ's daycare and told me to never tell Russ where the money came from. I pay $850 a month toward your mortgage. I looked at Sid. The house would have defaulted 14 months ago without my supplement. The bank has the payment records. Every deposit comes from Bowen Restoration's business account. Sid did not speak. His hands pressed harder on the chair. I pay $3,600 a year for your flood insurance. The policy I set up after I waterproofed your basement with my own hands on a Sunday while you watched the Lions game. I remember, Sid said. His voice had gone quiet. The authority was gone. What remained was the voice of a man who was watching receipts stack up on a table in another man's kitchen. The policy lapsed in March because someone changed the payment method from the household account to a Visa card ending in 4471. Russ's card. The card was maxed. The payment bounced. The insurance company sent a notice. Nobody responded. Your house is sitting in 3 feet of water right now, and it is completely uninsured. Russ pushed off the counter. I didn't change any payment method. I didn't know my card was on any insurance account. I know you didn't. I looked at Sid. Dad did. Sid's face lost its color the way a wall loses its color when you strip the primer. Slow, complete, he looked at Marjean. Marjean was already looking at the table. I moved the payment because the household account was short that month, Sid said. His voice was flat and small. I was going to move it back. That was 6 months ago. You did not move it back. You did not tell me. You let the policy lapse. And now your basement is flooding during the worst storm we have had in 6 years, and there is no claim to file. How much is the damage going to be? Russ asked from the counter. His voice had the careful register of a man who was doing math he did not want to finish. Without remediation in the next 48 hours, you were looking at furnace replacement, electrical panel corrosion, subfloor damage, and mold. $25,000 to $30,000. Without insurance. The number landed on the table the way water lands on a floor. It spread. It reached every corner. Sid's hands dropped from the chair back. Marjean's chin dropped. Russ's arms went to his sides. I almost stopped there. The look on my father's face was enough. The color gone, the jaw hanging slightly open, the hands on the chair no longer pressing but just resting. The way hands rest when the body behind them has given up on looking strong. But the knife on the table caught the kitchen light, the brass bolster with Bowen engraved in block letters, and I thought about my grandfather who built the company with that knife and a shop vac and who would have never told his grandson to sleep on a bench, and the thought carried me past the stopping point. I also paid Tara's car insurance. $180 a month for 14 months. $2,520. Tara tells her coworkers it is covered by work. It is covered by me. Sid blinked. Marjean did not. And I pay $1,200 a month for Russ's daycare. Russ straightened. That is a state subsidy. Mom applied for it. There is no state subsidy, Russ. There is a direct transfer from my business account to Little Explorers Daycare on Burton Street. Mom arranged it because she came to me 4 years ago and said you could not afford childcare. I have been paying $43,200 over 3 years so your kids could go to daycare and Linnea could work. There is no program. There is no government check. There is me. Russ's arms unfolded. His mouth opened. He looked at Margine, and Margine looked at the table, and the silence between mother and son filled with the sound of a lie that had been running for 3.5 years and had just stopped. Mom, Russ's voice cracked on the single syllable. You told me it was a subsidy. You told me the state approved it. I called the daycare to thank them for helping with the paperwork, and they said there was no government program, just a direct payment from a business account. I asked you about it, and you said it was a new county initiative. You looked me in the face and lied. Margine pressed her palms together in her lap. I did what I had to do. You could not have afforded it. So you took it from the brother you told to find a bench. I took it from the brother who could afford it. There is a difference. There is no difference, Mom. You took $148,000 from Thatcher over 4 years, and then you typed find a bench when he was standing in a flooded apartment with nowhere to go. You coached Tara's reply. You coached Dad's reply. The only person in this family who was not coached was me, and I sent nothing because I was asleep, and I would give anything to have been awake because I would have driven to his apartment and brought him home. Russ turned to me. His eyes were wet. I didn't know, Thatcher. I swear to you I didn't know. I know you didn't. I would have said something. I know. The silence sat between us. Keegan shifted in the doorway. His jaw was tight, and his arms were folded, and he was watching Margine with the expression of a man who has just understood something about his business partner's family that explains 6 years of phone calls I never picked up on Sundays. Sid gripped the back of the chair. His knuckles were white, and his breathing was shallow. And he looked at the knife on the table, his father's knife, and something behind his eyes shifted the way a foundation shifts before it cracks. I kept that pump running, Sid said. His voice broke on running. I maintained it. I checked the float switch. I watched the basin. You watched the basin. You did not replace the battery. A float switch without a battery is a light switch without a bulb. It does nothing when the power goes out. I told you that in April. I wrote it in a text message because I knew if I told you in person, you would nod and forget. I forgot. The word came out small. You forgot. You forgot the same way you forgot to move the insurance payment back. You forgot the same way you forgot to tell me Russ moved into the house. You forgot the way this family forgets everything I do, which is completely until you need it. Sid's right hand went flat on the table. His left found the chair edge. He sat down without deciding to sit. His shoulders dropped. His right knee bounced, the involuntary tremor of a body that has used up its arguments. His face drained from the ears inward, and his eyes went to the knife. His father's knife, and his chin trembled, and his lips pressed together in a line that would not hold. I picked up the knife from the table. I held it in my palm. The brass was warm from the kitchen heat, and the engraving was smooth under my thumb. The policy lapsed in March. You moved my premium to Russ's visa. Your basement has 3 feet of water and 0 coverage. The room held every word. Margine stood up from her chair. She came around the table and stood in front of me and looked at me with the face I had seen at every family dinner, every holiday, every Sunday phone call, the face that asked for money without asking and received help without thanking. But the face was different now. The makeup was tracked down her cheeks and the church coat was buttoned wrong, and her voice had no performance left in it. Thatcher, please, I am begging you. Bring the pumps to the house. The furnace is your father's only heat. If we lose it, we lose the house. I will pay you back. I will tell everyone the truth. I will do whatever you need me to do. Just please do not let us lose the house because of one night. It was not one night, Mom. It was 4 years. I know. You typed find a bench. You typed it to the person paying your mortgage. I know. And you are begging me now because the water is in your house and not in mine anymore, and the only difference between my apartment and your basement is that I know how to fix mine." Margene sat back down. Her hands went to the table and pressed flat, the same way Sid's had. Sid tried last. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a key, the guest room key, the one on the blue keychain that had hung by the front door of the Bowen house for as long as I could remember. He set it on the table between the insurance printout and the group chat screenshot. "You can have the room. Just bring the pumps." The key sat on the table. The guest room. The room that 5 hours ago was more important than my emergency. Now offered back. Not as shelter, but as a trade. Sleep for pumps, a bed for a favor. I picked up the key. I walked to Keegan's front door, opened it, stepped onto the porch, and set the key on the hood of the restoration van, next to the company logo that read Bowen Restoration. The rain had stopped. The air smelled like wet concrete and river mud. The key sat on the hood next to my grandfather's name, the name my family never respected, and I walked back inside and sat down at the table without a word. Sid watched me through the window. He saw the key on the van next to his father's name and his face went still. Not angry, not desperate, just still, the way a face goes when a man realizes the trade he offered is not large enough to cover the debt he created. The room was 5 hours too late and $148,000 too short, and it sat on the hood of a locked van full of every pump his basement needed. Keegan leaned against the doorframe. He had been watching the Bowen family from the outside for 6 years, hearing the Sunday calls Thatcher never picked up, noticing the jaw that tightened every January when the flood insurance premium posted. He had never said anything, because Keegan believed people had to find their own line. Tonight, Thatcher found it. The fallout arrived on Monday, the way water damage always arrives. Slowly first, then all at once. The financial damage was structural. Without flood insurance, the basement repairs would come from Sid's pocket. The furnace replacement, $4,200. The electrical panel, $3,800. Water extraction and remediation, $6,500 at market rate, the same rate I charged every client in Kent County. The rate that Sid had never paid, because Sid had never been a client. He had been a father with a son who worked for free. Mold remediation if the standing water was not extracted within 48 hours, $11,000 to $15,000. Total exposure without insurance, $25,500 to $29,500. Sid's pension was $2,100 a month. The math took less time than the storm. The social damage was quieter. Russ called Linnea from Keegan's kitchen and told her about the daycare. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We need to talk to Thatcher." And Russ said, "I don't think Thatcher is taking calls from us right now." And Linnea hung up. Tara found out about her car insurance Monday afternoon when the policy auto renewed and the charge appeared on Thatcher's business card, which Thatcher's accountant flagged and canceled. The insurance lapsed Tuesday. Tara's car sat in the dental office parking lot for 3 days while she figured out how to buy her own policy at $290 a month instead of the $180 Thatcher had been paying through a commercial bundle. She called Thatcher once. He did not answer. Margene sat in the Bowen family living room at 6 in the morning while the basement below her dripped. She sat on the couch where she had been folding laundry when Thatcher's group chat message came in, the couch where she had typed "find a bench" and sent it to the son who paid her mortgage. The house smelled like standing water and cold metal, the smell of a furnace that had been submerged and would not fire again. The folding knife was not in the house. It had not been in the house since Walter died, because the only Bowen who understood what that knife meant was the one she had told to find a bench. She picked up her phone and opened the group chat. The last message was still Tara's. "Don't bring your wet problems here." Below it, nothing, no reply from Thatcher. No follow-up. Just the gray space where a son used to answer, the space that $148,000 used to fill with transfers and payments and monthly deposits that nobody thanked him for, and everybody expected. She stared at the gray space for a long time. Then she closed the app without typing. There was nothing to type. The conversation had ended at find a bench, and the bench was the last word the Bowen family chat would ever hold. 2 weeks later, Sid hired a contractor to pump the basement, not Bowen Restoration, a company from Wyoming, Michigan, that charged $8,200 for extraction and remediation and did not return calls when the mold appeared behind the drywall 3 weeks after that. The mold remediation added $13,400. The total basement repair cost, without insurance, without Thatcher, was $29,800, paid across 2 credit cards and a home equity withdrawal that reduced Sid's remaining equity to $6,200 on a house worth $185,000. The house that Thatcher's $850 a month had kept out of default was now carrying more debt than it had in 20 years. Russ drove to the restoration warehouse on Wealthy Street on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks after the storm. He stood in the parking lot for 15 minutes, looking at the Bowen Restoration sign above the bay door before he got back in his car and drove home without going inside. He had never been to his brother's workplace before. He had never seen the van, the pumps, the dehumidifiers, the commercial air movers stacked 4 high along the wall, the dispatch desk where the field logs sat open to page 413, the small office where Thatcher and Keegan split the bookkeeping. He had never walked through the bay door and looked at the moisture meter calibration station or the wall where Thatcher's ICARC certificates hung in frames, or the photo of Walter Bowen from 1987 standing next to his first van with the folding knife visible in his shirt pocket. He had never asked what his brother did with his hands. And now he was sitting in a parking lot, looking at a sign that carried their shared last name and realizing that the name meant something different on that building than it had ever meant in the family chat. I almost called Russ that Thursday. I saw his car in the security camera footage. 15 minutes in the lot, engine running, never came in. The image of my brother sitting in a parking lot, trying to decide whether he deserved to walk into the building his brother built, stopped me. Not because I was angry, because I wanted him to walk in and he did not, and the space between wanting and doing is the same space that had defined the Bowen family for 4 years. The space where money went in and gratitude never came out. The first Monday in October. Sunrise, the restoration shop on Wealthy Street. I sat at the dispatch desk with the field log open to a new page. The Bowen knife sat next to the log, blade folded, brass catching the early light through the bay window. 3 calls had come in overnight from the same storm that had flooded my apartment and my parents' basement and half of the Near East Side. The calls were on the board in Keegan's handwriting. The Hendricks place on Division, a commercial space on Fulton, a residential on Lake Drive. None of them were the Bowen house. None of them would be. My apartment was still wet. Stoddard, the building manager, had called Sunday to say the sump pump was replaced and the water was receding. But the carpet was gone, and the baseboards would need a week. I knew the timeline. I knew the materials. I knew the cost. And I knew, because I had measured water damage for 8 years, that the things you lose in a flood are not always the things the water touches. Sometimes the things you lose are the people who watch the water rise and decide you are not worth a dry room. Keegan came through the bay door carrying 2 coffees and the moisture meter kit. He set 1 coffee next to the knife and looked at the call board. 3 jobs. Want to start with the Hendricks place on Division? I picked up the knife. I ran my thumb over the engraving the way my grandfather used to do before he started a job. The small ritual of a working man who believed that the tools you carry say more about you than the people who do not. I folded the blade closed, put the knife in my jacket pocket, and stood up. Start with the Hendricks place. Keegan loaded the van. I closed the field log and locked the dispatch desk and walked to the bay door. The Bowen Restoration sign above the door caught the sunrise the way it caught every sunrise, steady and readable and built to last, the way my grandfather built everything. The van pulled out onto Wealthy Street heading east, loaded with pumps and hoses and dehumidifiers, and 2 men who showed up when the water rose. Behind us, the Bowen house sat on its foundation with a basement full of damage and a family full of debt and a group chat with no new messages. The guest room key sat in the dispatch desk drawer where I had dropped it Sunday morning, brass dulled, blue keychain still attached, the last thing my father offered, and the first thing I set down. The knife was in my pocket. The van was full. The line between wet and dry starts somewhere, and I knew exactly where it was. Welcome back to Family Secret Tales. If this story reminded you that the person your family calls last might be the one who was paying first, share it tonight. Hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me, have you ever been the bench they told you to find? I will see you in the next one.